Hello out there, and today we are counting down the top 10 EDCs of all time. And this is a video that was presented by Slicey Dicey. He tagged a whole bunch of people, made it an open tag as well. I will link to his video down below. If you are not aware of who Slicey Dicey is, well, welcome to Earth. You're coming at a weird time. Things are a little strange here, but I hope you enjoy your visit to our planet. But seriously, guys, Slicey Dicey, really good guy, good friend of mine, and a good idea to do what seems like a more straightforward video than it actually is. This is a tough video to make because what are you really grading your top 10 EDCs on? Is it the impact in the community? Is it your personal experience? Is it like, you know, because there are a lot of knives that I know are some of the best EDCs of all time, like that the public would agree on that aren't necessarily on my list. And is it the stuff that I like right now, or is it the stuff that I used to like? And so today's video is going to sort of be a trip down memory lane for me, because my top 10 is going to be stuff that really influenced my collection throughout the time that I built it. It's not necessarily the 10 knives that I like to carry the most right now, or the 10 best knives that I've ever had. It's the 10 knives that throughout my time, you know, collecting knives, making videos, doing all the stuff that I do, the knives that have really been the essential 10 for me. So, yeah, it was really hard to narrow it down to just 10. I actually have 15. I have 5 honorable mentions. Tried to cheat a little bit in order to get more onto this video. And what you have in front of you right now is one of those honorable mentions. We'll get right into it with these. This is the Benchmade 484. This variation of it is a Knife Center exclusive. This is one of the best designed knives, I think. Just blade shape and the way that it fits my hand and the look of it. It's Benchmade Blue Class at its absolute finest. The one that I had a couple years ago was the 484-1, which was in carbon fiber S90V. This one is M390 with these wood scales, and guys, I think I like this one more. The only knock on this knife, and actually one of the main reasons why I sold it the first time around, was the thumb studs are a little bit of a problem, in that when you put the clip into your pocket, a lot of times the thumb stud can catch on it, and then also the thumb stud actually will deploy the knife, which a lot of people like, that Emerson kind of style, that wave feature, just being able to open it, pulling it out of the pocket. But when you're not expecting it and you're not in control of it, and it only happens sometimes, not necessarily a good thing. But as far as looks go, and just having a, you know, a sort of mini Reptilian size kind of knife, but a much classier and high-end kind of version of that, let's say, it's a great one. All right, other honorable mentions, and again, a lot of the stuff is stuff that used to play a big role in my collection, maybe not so much anymore. Here is an Openlm. This is the Openlm number 6. I had a bunch of Openlms at one point, guys. I was modding them, I was dyeing the scales, I was having a lot of fun with them. I've always appreciated something that was really inexpensive but well made and just will definitely stand the test of time. Super thin blades on these too, so even though it's not necessarily the most high-end material, they cut. And they cut pretty darn well, and they're easy to resharpen because they're so thin. And the other thing I really like is just how simple the pivot, like collar lock, I think it's called, the collar lock. Yeah, how the collar lock actually like rotates, and it's a functional locking mechanism for a knife that doesn't seem like it should have one. So yeah, these things are very good, very cool to have. And it was one of those things when I was getting into knives, that's what I always heard. Like, oh, why don't you have an Openlm? You should at least have one. And this is not my knife. And I don't actually own one right now. But I would agree that I should. And yeah, it's something that for 15, 20 bucks, I think you can get one. Really good thing to have. Every size that you could want one in, it's available. Okay, a couple more honorable mentions. And this is going to be a little bit of a shocker. Benchmade bug out. I know that the community loves these knives. I really like mine too, don't get me wrong. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking about how this was a great knife and one of my favorite in my collection. And honestly, I can't really find that many faults with it. But that said, it just isn't something that I go back to all that much anymore. So it is very relevant in like the history of my collection, but it was only for a short time. And while I still use it every now and then, it's something that just has sort of passed me by. And as the new variations come out and they keep doing more stuff with it, it stays relevant and interesting, but it just wasn't enough to crack the top 10. And last two nominations for honorable mention. Here is the GEC number 6. This was one of my favorite knives of last year. This is a knife that is on me pretty regularly, and I love it. The reason why it's not making the top 10 is I had to have some kind of criteria to leave things off. I've only owned this knife for a year, so talk to me in a couple more years, and let's see if it becomes a real, like, steadfast mainstay in my pocket, and see what kind of mileage this gets put on it. And then finally, the last honorable mention is a excellent knife. Here is the Cold Steel Toughlite, and this one is jacked up. This is actually the first knife that I ever broke the tip off of. And this is a knife that, for me, when everyone I worked with was using box cutters, this is the knife that I would bring to work, and I'd be like, guys, if you want to upgrade and get a knife that is basically a box, it like works like a box cutter, but it's a whole lot more than that. Like, this is the one to go with. And it's a really good transition knife for people who are trying to get into knives and, you know, they're using box cutters or carrying multi-tools or something like that. But haven't gone all the way with just a regular pocket knife. This is a very utilitarian thing. There's a smaller version. Mine, of course, like I said, it's been broken off. I tried to like clean that up, acid etch, did a whole bunch of junk to it. But it's one of those knives I don't carry anymore, but I keep it just for the memories. And also, I mean, it's just a good blade. So again, not quite there to crack the top 10. So now that we're 7 minutes into the video, let's get into the actual 10 best EDCs, in my opinion, of my life of all time. Number 10, CRKT Squid. It's a great knife. There is not much that is wrong with a knife like this. A lot of different variations that have been out there. Some of them are limited edition. Some of them are in constant production. Some of them can be found in the secondary market. The thing that's great about this knife is it's extremely inexpensive in any incarnation that you find it in, at least until it gets overblown after market. But it's extremely inexpensive, great functional knife, going to be legal just about everywhere because of how small it is. It is somewhat overbuilt for a small knife, and it doesn't look like it's overbuilt, but it just has a strength and security that that you don't necessarily get a lot from a knife that is this inexpensive and this small. So I've always felt very confident using these knives. My wife's main EDC is a Squid, and she does not take care of it, and it just is fine. It goes and goes. Every few months I'll grab it and I'll I'll resharpen it for her, and it'll be perfect. But I mean, she does not treat it well, and it still locks up great. Action is fantastic. So these things are just little tanks, even though they might not look like it. So highly recommend these guys. Number 9, the Paramilitary II. So Spyderco is on here a couple times on this list, actually. And the PM2 and the Para 3, I guess you could group them together. I don't own a Para 3 right now, but these are knives that when I was trying to make that jump from budget stuff into the nicer stuff, the Paramilitary II had recently come out and you couldn't find them anywhere. And the hype around these things was just mind-boggling. And you know, I looked and people were selling them at just outrageous markup, and it was like, can you get one? If you get one, is it real? There was so much talk about these knives, and like, if you got one, you were the coolest person on the planet. And it's one of those things where when there's all this hype behind something, it can never live up to it. It can never really be as good as people say. And the fact of the matter is, with this platform, it is. It is that good. It is an excellent, excellent knife. The only issue that I've ever seen people having with these really is just that the tip is very acute, and if you are going to go really ham on it, you can break it off. I've seen a lot of broken tips on these, but that said, I mean, it's a knife that's a worker, you know, and the people who break the tips rock it and are proud of that and don't worry about it because, I mean, they just keep using the knife. It's not meant to be a showpiece. It is a collectible, absolutely, at this point with a lot of the variations, but at its core, this is a very usable knife and a great knife to carry and a great knife in hand just because of the blade to handle ratio. I prefer the Para 3, to be honest, but all in all, whether you get the 2 or the 3, they're both really excellent. Getting into number 7. Number 7 is another Spyderco, and it's the Tenacious. The Tenacious is that gateway drug, guys. It is the first Spyderco that I ever had, not this specific one. This one was modded and sent to me as a gift from my buddy, the Lawn Ranger. Props to him. I always appreciate that. But the Tenacious is that knife that when you are getting into Spyderco, you get an understanding of what they can do by spending a little bit of money and getting a knife like this. And at the time, you know, that I got my first one, I think they were like $45 on Amazon, something like that. And $45, you get one of these, and you think, this is a solid knife. It's a really solid knife. So if I spend $45 and I get this, like, what's going to happen when I spend 3 times this amount or 4 times this amount? What kind of knife am I going to get? And it just really, like, fuels that addiction and that interest in the rest of the brand. And that's what it did for me. To be honest, my first Spyderco was actually not a Tenacious. It was from the same line, though. It was the smaller version, the Ambitious. But the Tenacious, for me, it's just the exemplary, like the the flagship of that line. And it's the one that people turn to the most when they're talking about getting into the hobby and what knife really pushed them into Spyderco. You know, the first one for so many people is this guy. All right. Number 7, going from arguably the least expensive knife, or one of the least expensive knives on the list, to the most expensive knife. Here we are, my little Encode. So Chris Reeve, always been enamored with the design, always been very into getting a knife like this, either this one or the Sebenza. I was always obsessed with the Sebenza. Always was. And then when I won this knife in a raffle and got it in hand, I just really enjoyed it. And then the few times that I've handled a Sebenza, I've actually purposefully avoided Sebenzas because I wanted one so much. But the few times since I owned this that I've handled one, I've actually just preferred this thing. So the Encode just has a few different variations. It looks very similar, but there are a few aspects of it is in terms of design that sort of give it its own identity. Now the new Sebenza 31 is definitely one that I'm going to be interested in. I'd very much like to get one of those. But for me, the Encode is just indicative of an EDC that definitely lives up to the hype, and it has, I don't know, just this aura about it. A Chris Reeve knife for me, it lived up to the expectation, and because of that, I just have a ton of respect for the quality and the build and what this means. And this has obviously been a knife that I haven't been afraid to put in my pocket and use and carry. And yeah, I just like this one specifically, but the entire platform, whether you're looking at the Encodes or the Sebenzas or some of the other stuff, just Chris Reeve knives in general, like he makes EDCs that are just essential in the community. In that, I mean, when you are making that transition, you know, through from the Tenacious to the PM2 to like the next thing, you know, then all of a sudden you start hearing about the big 3 in Strider, Sebenza, and Strider, Chris Reeve, and Hinderer. For me, it was always Chris Reeve more than the other two. And yep, super pumped that I have this one and use it and own it. Number 6. We almost lost the camera there. Whew. Getting serious. Number 6 is the 943. The Benchmade 943. This is one of the best models that there is out there. And I mean, there's a lot of correlation between this and the Paramilitary II, just in that, you know, as you're developing your tastes in Benchmade, let's say, the 940 or 943 is going to be one that once you try one of the more inexpensive ones, maybe that door opens and you really decide you want to get this essential EDC from them. And this is the one that when people talk about the best Benchmades, they always come back to the 940, 943 platform. Usually people are talking about the 940. For me, the 943 is really what it's all about. I love the blacked out look to it. I really like the blue backspacer on it. And so that sort of did it for me. Plus I just prefer the blade shape. And this one specifically has been a great one to have. When I had my 940s, I really liked them and enjoyed them, but I always ended up selling them. And this knife, for some reason, it just struck a chord with me when I got it, and it's never going to go anywhere. So this one, I really honestly can't believe it's this low on the list, but when we get into the top 5, you'll see why. Number 5, my one knife for everything, the Domino. Name a fault with this knife. I can't. I can't really think of anything that if this were my design that I would change. Could you upgrade some materials? Sure. Could you do this and that? But like design-wise, it is fantastic. It feels great. One of the great things about the Domino that, I mean, I've talked about this knife so many times, but one of the great things is that when you have a forward choil, so often with designs, you're sort of forced into using it. Because if you don't, you'll be so separated from the cutting edge if you like choke back. But with this knife, it works really well in either configuration. This is one that from the moment I got it, and I think I literally just talked about this in a recent video. From the moment I got it, it was a knife that just completely changed my outlook. And I'd seen people posting stuff about the Domino and talking about what a great knife it was. But like getting a knife like this really made me understand that no one model is the be-all, end-all. And what I mean by that is like all the talk, all the hype was about the Paramilitary II when I got the Domino. That's what everybody was still talking about. And when I got the Domino, I realized, all right, there's not just one knife that you need to get. I mean, there's a whole lot more to it than that. You can get, if you don't want the Paramilitary II, or if it's not the one for you, there's another knife that's just as good that maybe other people don't recognize or appreciate as much. But like, take your time, find the right one for you kind of thing. And the Domino really showed me that because it was on the same kind of price point, maybe a little more expensive than the PM2, but I actually traded a PM2 to get it. So, that one has been one that I've always gone back to and relied on over and over throughout my time. Number 4. When was it going to be on here? Oh, well, there was no doubt it was going to be here, right? The Kershaw Leek. Kershaw Leek it's a classic. It's Ken Onion. It started so much for me in my collection. I think it was my first USA-made Kershaw. Maybe not my first USA-made knife, period. But yeah, my first USA-made Kershaw, my first Ken Onion. And while if we're being really realistic, there are some opportunities design-wise that would make this maybe a little bit better, especially on the liner lock version. This model is just an excellent knife to use, an excellent knife to carry, versatile. It looks good, has that gentleman's feel, but also is very functional and thin. 14C28N, easy to resharpen. I mean, as far as actual carry, which is the biggest problem, I think, with the knife, like how the clip rides. Apart from that, it's pretty much as good a knife as you could want. I'm surprised there's never been like a larger version of the Leek, a slightly larger. I know they have different like scallion and chive and whatnot, but just the actual Leek maybe an inch and a half longer would be just fantastic. But like as itself, this knife personally means a whole lot to me and functionally lives up to what that sentimental kind of feeling is about it. Top 3. Wow, top 3. Sage 5. Let's just say the entire Spyderco Sage series. I've had every single one of the Sage series except for the Sage 4, and that's because it was a backlock and I thought it was stupid, and then by the time I realized it wasn't stupid, it was too hard to get. I think those run for like 400 bucks. So I was stupid, because I remember being able to get one for like 90 bucks at one point. But the Sage is a classic kind of blade shape. It is one of the best Spydercos out there, period. And the compression lock, especially on the Sage 5, just makes it wonderful. For me, personally, why is it so important? Well, one, I carried the heck out of this knife, used it a lot. It was a mainstay in my pocket for a pretty good long time. But more than that, it's the knife that started this channel. It's the knife that really inspired everything that I've grown my collection to be, just because this channel has impacted the way I build my collection. So for me, this one is a very personal one. And as we go, you know, all these knives are becoming more and more personal, sure. But this one is just a very special one. And it's a great knife to carry. And now that you have a lightweight version out there that's maybe a little bit less expensive, there's just good options with it. And the other ones, like the titanium version, which is the Sage 2, and the liner lock version, the Sage 1, those really aren't that marked up anymore. So if you can find them, they're really not that expensive. It's just a great EDC user kind of knife. And I've had almost zero complaints when it comes to this one. Number 2, this might be a bit of a curveball, but the CRKT Ripple is one of the best knife models I've ever seen, period. And it's an example of CRKT at their absolute finest. Whenever I get irritated with CRKT, and it happens regularly, and it will happen again, probably soon on the channel. Whenever I get irritated with them because they don't do something very well, I think about a knife like this, that they just absolutely knocked out of the park, and that they got everything so right with it. And that's what I remember when I think about them not doing well, because I know what they can do, because they did it here. The Ripple is, I believe, the first Ken Onion design for CRKT. And there's a number of different variations, 2 different price tiers. One that is this very thin, like super thin, classy stainless steel frame lock. But then we also have a little bit thicker, but still, you know, nothing bulky, liner lock with aluminum scales. And slightly different blade shape, as you can see. But the thing about it, the thing that makes this special, is that both of these versions, like, as different as they are executed so remarkably well. Yes, we do have bearings that are free-floating, so they're not caged. So if you disassemble this version, you might have a little bit of a headache on your hands. And you have a clip that is unique, to say the least. Unconventional, maybe. But action, ergos, comfort, build quality, it's all on point. Great looking. I mean, you're going to carry this knife, you're not going to find very many other knives. Well, there is a ZT now that sort of has the same kind of shape on the handle. But you're not going to find very many knives that look like this either. So you have something that like has an identity of its own. It's so good. You know, I'm sitting here right now putting this at number 2, and I'm almost wishing I put it at number 1. And for me, being the Ken Onion fanatic that I am, this knife is the reason that I sort of focused on CRKT, because I was a Ken Onion fan with Kershaw. Ken Onion goes over to CRKT. Well, what's he doing there? This. Okay. And then everything with CRKT starts. So for me, I mean, it definitely played a whole lot more into my collection and my collecting than just the knife. So, but if it was just the knife, it's a hell of a knife. Number 1, have we figured it out? Could it really be anything but the Benchmade Mini Reptilian? This knife for me is everything. You know, it's not my one knife for everything. If I was realistically going to just pick the one knife that I had to use for the rest of my life, we know that the Domino is that, just because of the qualities that it has, it's still that. But the best EDC, the best knife to have in my pocket, my favorite platform, it's got to be this. And over time, it just grows and grows, like my fondness for it. It just continues to expand as I get different variations and as new stuff happens. My excitement for this model just does not go away. The one that's in front of you right now, the D2 version, is the one that I have used by far the most. There was a year where this was easily the most carried knife in my entire collection. You know, I still had a pretty good sized collection at that point too, but this D2 one, love it. Just really, really like it. There isn't one that I don't like though, and what I like about my collection of mini grips is that as time goes by, like every single one of them has been my favorite for a time, if that makes sense. You know, they all get their moment in the sun. So many different variations you can have with it, different blade shapes. Sure, you know, there's the 3 different styles in the drop point, the sheep's foot, and then the tanto. There's also a bunch of steels. If you can get one custom made, you can definitely do that. So you can pick your poison, make it any way that you want. For me though, if we're talking about a stock knife here, I actually like the scales. I like the scales as they are, even though they're plastic. They're comfortable. They're executed pretty well. Could it be better because it's not that high end? Sure, but you do have options with G10 as well, so you could spend an extra few bucks and get something like that. Personally, for me, the S30V, which is the standard steel on it now, is still, to me, a premium steel. And the 154 CM that was on it before that was a premium steel for me at that point when I first got... Was it this one? Yeah. When I first got this one as well. So I've never had a problem with the materials, and I think for me, this being my first Benchmade and creating that obsession, this is the knife that when I was talking about the 940 and the 943 earlier, this is the knife that led me to this. You know, and this is the knife that actually, if we're like really, if I can find it again, this is the knife that led me to my 484 when I had it. You know, everything with Benchmade just sort of snowballed, and it started with getting the mini Reptilian in hand and having an axis lock and understanding what that was all about. This is by far the number one. Now that I'm talking about it, I really understand. You know, I was talking about the Ripple. I'm like, oh man, maybe the Ripple should have been number one, but no, there's no way. It's the mini grip all the way. I don't see a day when it won't be the mini grip. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of knives that could have been on this list. There's probably stuff that I omitted. You know, I'm thinking about the Benchmade Anthem, which probably would have been an honorable mention at this point, but there's so many things that go into making a true essential EDC, the best EDCs of all time. But these 10 were the ones that really like resonated in my life and impacted the way that not just the way things went when I carried that knife, but the way my decision making went when I built the rest of my knife collection. And that's why they're the ones on the list. All right, guys, any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know. Slicey Dicey, again, thank you for the tag. Really great idea for the video. Happy to be a part of it. Check his videos out if you haven't already, guys. But I'll talk with you soon. Take care and have a good one.